Our scripture today is from the book of Daniel, and it's the third chapter. It's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I want to tell you ahead of time that for the writers of this book, for the original listeners, this would have been a funny story. Quite humorous. The way it's written, the repetition in it is meant to be funny. So I would ask for you to hear it in that way. It's rather long, so you're going to, you probably all know the story really well, but to hear it in its entirety, I hope that you can catch some of the humor of it, okay? King Nebuchadnezzar made a golden statue whose height was 60 cubits and whose width was 6 cubits. He set it up on the palm of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent for the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the province to assemble and come to the dedication of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces assembled for the dedication of the statue that the king Nebuchadnezzar had set up. When they were standing before the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, the herald proclaimed loudly, "You are commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble, you are to fall down and worship the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire." Therefore, as soon as all the people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble, all the people, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden statue the king Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Accordingly, at this time, certain Chaldeans came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble shall fall down and worship the golden statue, and whoever does not fall down and worship shall be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These pay no heed to you, O king. They do not serve your gods, and they do not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought in. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods and you do not worship the golden statue that I have set up? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble, to fall down and worship the statue that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king. The simplicity of this is meant to be the contrast. Answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you on this matter. If our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, Be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face was distorted. He ordered the furnace heated up 7 times more than was customary, and ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So the men were bound, still wearing their tunics and trousers and hats and garments, and they were thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Because the king's command was urgent and the furnace was so overheated, the raging flames killed the men who lifted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the furnace of blazing fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up quickly, and he said to his counselors, "Was not 3 that we threw bound into the fire?" They answered the king, "True, O king," he replied, "but I see 4 unbound, walking in the middle of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the fourth has the appearance of a god." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over the bodies of these men. The hair on their heads was not singed. Their tunics were not harmed. Not even the smell of fire came from them. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel to deliver his servants who trusted in him." They disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worshipped any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree: any people, nation, or language that utters blasphemy against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruin. For there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Rather long, fun story. I hope you noticed that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were actually promoted instead when they were supposed to be fired. Yeah, I'm so glad somebody got that. They were promoted instead of being fired. I know, it's funny. Yeah, I had to say it again. They were promoted instead of fired. Okay. This is I don't know about you, but I was told this story as a small child. It was in our children's Bible story book that we would read at night. And I can remember seeing those 4 people in the furnace. And so this is a children's story that I so rarely get to preach on, and I'm glad that we're focusing on integrity this month. And this is certainly an image of integrity. This is the focus to me of the whole passage. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's response to the king: "If our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. If not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up." So in other words, whether we're delivered or not, we are still going to stand in this way. And that is a perfect image of integrity. Integrity is unwavering in its firmness. We have been working on integrity this whole month, and I have a new definition for us to operate from this today. Definition of integrity by Brene Brown. Her definition is integrity is choosing courage over comfort, choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy, and choosing to practice our values rather than simply profess them. Now, I have had this definition all month long, and yet that first line is the reason I have hesitated to use it all month long. Integrity is choosing courage over comfort. I must admit that I gravitate to the latter part of this definition. I gravitate to it's the practice of your values. And I just didn't really, I really wasn't, I don't know, it just didn't feel necessary to go to the courage step. Is it really necessary to go all that way to courage when you talk about integrity? So it's taken me a couple of weeks to get to this definition and say yes, yes, yes. Integrity involves courage. It involves what's doing right when it's hard. And it involves being true to the values that we hold dear. So this definition has caused me to ask the question that I'd like for us to think about today. What is the root of integrity? From where does integrity come from? How do we even birth integrity? How can we find integrity? Where's the root? Where can we get to the source of integrity? Now, we have before us an almost impossible story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, we know for sure that the king employed more than just 3 Jews. And yet, the story is about 3 Jews that refused to bow. Now, are we to assume that's because the Chaldeans did not bring only, but 3 forward? Or was it that only 3 had the courage to do what was consistent with their values? I think it's probably that, and I think that's probably why this story is written in a humorous way. That in some way, this is a story that's hard to swallow. It's hard to stomach. It's a little bit it could be somewhat of a critique on the Hebrew people that only 3 refused to bow down before a statue. So it's kind of made lightly. It kind of has these repetitions in it that are funny, that are meant to poke fun at the wordy and self-obsessed King Nebuchadnezzar, gathering all of these different, important people present so that he can dedicate his statue. And then every time you hear the musical ensemble, you're supposed to bow. The repetition of it is meant to be humorous. And I think that's probably why. It's because this passage can also be a critique for those who did not have courage on that day. So, integrity is when we choose courage over comfort. Much more comfortable to be on your knees in front of a statue than to possibly face a fiery furnace. And sometimes integrity calls for that, for us to face the fiery furnace. So how is it that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were able to stand when everybody else around them bowed? It's because of the verse before. Can we go back? It's because of what they said. It didn't matter if they went in the fire and their God didn't show up, or if they went in and God did, that they were going to do the right thing. The root of integrity is to know exactly who you are, no matter the outcome. So in other words, their identity as followers of their God was what was most important. So you could say that the root of identity, the root of integrity, is identity. The root of integrity is identity. Knowing who you are, who you belong to, who is it that loves you, where did you come from? That can be the source of integrity. I have heard it said by many parents that I encounter, I don't want to bring my children to church because I want them to be able to choose when they get old enough. And my response to them is, they will have no root from which to choose from. So the root of integrity is identity. You must know who you are in order to make a choice. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew exactly who they were as the chosen Hebrew people, that they knew whether God showed up or not, God was on their side. So I have this very sweet thing to share with you. Our youth are going through a confirmation class, and one of their assignments was they were to write churches anywhere in the world, and Google's great for that. Write anywhere in the world and ask them, what is it that makes you Methodist? And they got the sweetest responses. One is to London. My son wrote to London, and their first question is, you're a Tucker. Could you be from Wales? Which I thought was funny. But they give a little history about Methodism. It could be in our brochure, just like us. But she ends it with this. And this is the kind of thing that belonging, identity, is exactly what we're trying to instill in our children, and is the source of identity of integrity. She says, I hope this helps you. God bless you as you go through confirmation classes, and may you know your own calling in God as you mature. God has a plan and a future for your life. You are unique. God loves you. Never, never forget that. The root of integrity is identity. So another one was from the church in Fuji. And the kid that wrote this one, he said, well, that's what the name of my water is, so that's why I looked. You've all had Fuji water, right? So if I looked up a Methodist church in Fiji, Fiji, I was mispronouncing that. In Fiji, and the church, they gave this beautiful history of the Methodist Church in Fiji, and surprisingly, it's the largest Christian denomination in that country. And the person goes on to say that there were many martyrs that brought Christianity to Fiji. I just don't really think about Methodists as martyrs. And then they go on to talk about the structure, how there were classes, very similar history, same thing as the Wesley societies and all that. But then they end with this this wonderful statement here. The work of John Wesley that addresses social issues is something that Methodists in Fiji admire and draw their mission plan around. Does that sound like us or what? This means for us that being a Methodist is being mission-driven. Mission to usher souls to be saved and to receive God's salvation in Jesus Christ. It means that we are called to reach out to our communities and stand with the poor, the unfortunate, the hurts, and those who are in the edge of society. It demands sacrifice and passion. This could be something that was spoken here, not around the world, on the other side of the world, but right here. Identity is the source of integrity. There is such integrity in the Methodist Church because we have an identity that can be felt in all of our churches. So I'm grateful to the kids having this exercise. So the root of integrity is identity. Children should have these moments where they know that they're Christian, that this is from where their Christian faith begins. If you'll allow me to tell another story about Archbishop Desmond Tutu. As you know, I took a class from him in seminary. He was asked why he became a priest, and he said that at the age of 9, he was walking on a path with his mother, and they came across a white man, and in the apartheid culture, a black person would stand aside and let a white person pass and show respect by, nodding or tapping the hat or something like that. And that was required. That was the way apartheid culture required that subservient white, black culture. Anyway, and so as one day he was 9 years old and he was walking with his mom on this path, this dirt path, and up ahead was a white man. And the white man, before they got to the right distance where they should have stepped aside, instead, the white man stepped aside to let them pass, his mother and himself. And as they passed, the man tipped his hat in respect to them. And so as they walked by, he looked to his mother and he said, "Who was that man?" And it was Trevor Huddleston. He was the local priest. And at that moment, Desmond Tutu said at that moment, he knew he wanted to be a priest. Because his mother said, "He's a man of God." And he knew he wanted to be a man of God. Belonging leads to identity. Knowing who you are leads to identity. The beautiful thing about identity, we got to teach our kids who they are, who we are. We got to believe who we are as people and children of God. All that's important. But here's one of the most important things about integrity that is evident in this passage, is that integrity has the potential to save lives. I get kind of choked up when I think about it. If that priest had not stepped aside, would Desmond Tutu have become an archbishop? Would he have been a Nobel Prize winner for helping apartheid come down? Integrity saves lives. In this story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they walk out of the fiery furnace. And suddenly all Jews are safer than they were before. Integrity saves lives. It has a way of drawing us to it. of having that gravity. Don't you love that image of gravity, where it's where there's the planet and there's the plane, and the planet is on the plane, and you can see the gravity and things falling into it. Integrity has a way of having gravity falling into it. And acts of integrity will pull others to it and save them as well. So the root of integrity is belonging, and integrity itself can save lives. Now we know this because we follow Jesus. It's a very simple story. Man believed in something, died for it. No matter whether God showed up or not on the cross to take him down, died for it anyway. And now there's a history full of people that belong to something bigger than themselves, with an identity and a sense of integrity.